we jumped right into the therapies. Our daughter might be missing that center part of her brain, but she was going to be fine. And as parents, we were going to make sure we did all of the therapies for her to thrive and grow. The real panic, the real panic wouldn't set in for a couple of months. This is part 4. It was right after Poppy had her MRI and had the anesthesia that the real feeding issues began. She had never been great at nursing, but we had gotten the hang of it, and she was growing and she was gaining weight, but it became near impossible after that MRI. Hindsight is 2020. I can now see that that was a regression. She was better at nursing and eating at 3 months of age rather than 6 months of age. A child should always only be advancing in their skills. They shouldn't be going backwards. But again, we just thought she needed extra help. And so our pediatrician actually connected us with a feeding team. So I would go every other week to this group of 3 ladies that consisted of a dietitian, a lactation consultant, and a physical therapist, and they would watch me feed Poppy. They would give me tips and tricks. They would kind of like track her growth on their own. Poppy was an excellent sucker. Like, she was a pacifier queen. That girl loved her pacifier. And so we just had to switch her to a bottle, which was kind of a bummer for me. Like, I had nursed my other 2 kids until they were like over the age of 2. And so to stop with Poppy at 5 months, I was a bit bummed, but whatever Poppy needed, we were going to do. Whatever was best for her was best. Yeah, I just switched to pumping and then feeding her, but she was so slow at taking a bottle. So I would literally pump for 30 minutes and then give her a bottle, which took about an hour. And then basically the whole cycle had to start over again. We did that through, I think, the end of August. It just wasn't possible once September came around and school started again and I had to drive my kids to and from school. We just switched to formula at that point. There was definitely a regression in her feedings. In other areas, she just became stagnant. So in addition to this feeding therapy, we were also doing occupational therapy in our home, and we were also meeting with a vision therapist. We thought that we could help train the brain to like overcome this vision stuff by using high contrast black and white, by using colors that the brain can maybe perceive a bit better, like the color bright red and yellow. So we were doing different therapies within our home. There was just no growth happening. Also, whenever we would lay Poppy down on the floor, she would go, like, her body would be straight and her arms would be up by her head, which like was adorable. Like, she was always so cute, but like that's not supposed to happen developmentally. We had seen before she was able to kind of put her hands in her mouth, and this was her new home base position. I started to spiral as a mom. I was living in a space where I didn't have answers and things were not getting better. In the areas of feeding, things were getting a lot worse. And so I was then trying to figure out what else is going on, what caused her to be missing that part of her brain. When you don't have answers, you kind of make up your own narrative. And so I started turning to myself, trying to figure out what I did wrong as a mom. So I probably replayed my pregnancy hundreds of times in my brain, trying to figure out what I did, what my body did to cause this to happen to my daughter. Like, I had hyperemesis in my pregnancy. I was sick well through the whole 2nd trimester. I took a lot of Zofran, even though it like literally didn't work. I was pregnant all of 2021, which was like the height of kind of like COVID time. So I had COVID. The stress on a mom when things aren't going well with their child is so extreme. At this point, we're at the end of the summer. Poppy is like 6-7 months old. We're still a few weeks away from her being able to see the neurologist, who we were hoping and praying would provide us some clarity or give us more information as to what was going on with our daughter. I was going into our pediatricians pretty much every week with new symptoms I was seeing in Poppy. I wanted them to check different things. We were doing some blood tests. I took her to an ER one time because I thought maybe she was having seizures, and they did the, what is it called? Anyways, she was not having seizures, but I everything about Poppy, I was just in panic mode. Like, my mind was just spiraling. One of those visits into the pediatricians, our pediatrician decided, you know what, let's run a genetic test. He had thought about sending us to the geneticist, but he said they're 2 years out. Like, pretty much impossible to get into. So he said, you know what, let's just do a basic DNA panel that he had the ability to submit. So it was like a basic cheek swab with Poppy. and we sent it off, and that took about a month to get back. So this is the same test that you would get done prenatal, which we didn't have done with any of our kids. We didn't have any DNA chromosome tests done when they were in utero. Here, I'll draw a picture. So those are like pretty basic DNA tests. They're just looking to see if something's wrong with a chromosome. So we have 23 X's, right? Chromosomes. They're just looking to see if maybe you have an extra one, or if you're like missing part of one. That's what this DNA panel looks at. And Poppy's came back totally fine. There was nothing wrong with any of her chromosomes. Now, in a DNA test, they can get more specific before birth, but it's usually only if they were looking for something specific due to family history. But we didn't have any family history for them to look at. So that came back normal. So at this point, we are just doing our best to live a normal life. Poppy got to go to the Oregon coast on a family trip. She got to go to San Diego on a family trip. School had started, so we were doing all of the drop-off and pickups. We were intermixing the therapies. But deep down as parents, like my husband and I both knew that like something was greatly wrong, and that was causing a lot of stress within our home. Poppy was having really bad reflux issues, also reflex issues. Everything was making her startle, which would then make her start crying. But thankfully, it was finally time for us to see the neurologist. And he was such a blessing. He pushed so hard to get us the answers that we needed, but not necessarily wanted.